The story begins in a dark alley of a gloomy city. The guy leans against the wall, breathing heavily and coughing up blood. He ran away from the soldiers. They tried to find him in an alley and, using swear words, kicked the dogs all around. He fell down, breathing heavily, leaning on his hands and knees, hearing footsteps nearby. He notices an approaching barefoot figure and expresses surprise. It was a young, beautiful woman and a large, brutish man. The man tells the woman to kill him, and without a word, the woman prepares a magical charge in her hand and aims it at the man. The pain is excruciating. His eyes roll back in his head, and then he screams as a large column of fire rises above the city in the distance. The maid is surprised to be invited to a party at Damien's house. As he dies, the guy whispers that they got rid of him, they still managed. The action shifts to a ball. A man announces that a special guest has been invited today. At the banquet, people are talking and raising glasses. The man announces that the mage present recently received the title of Great Sage from the Emperor, and that the copying magic he discovered has the power to change the world. The mage thanks everyone and explains that his name is Lane, and that he is incredibly happy to meet them. The woman and man whisper, commenting on his youth. The woman immediately pounces on Lid, saying she'd like to speak with such a genius and asking him to become her son's tutor. Lid laughs and says he's not that great. He leaves the ball and goes to the balcony, wearily saying he's very tired. This is the world of aristocrats, and all the people who raise them can enter this hall. For me this is, so to speak, another world. The maid finally saw Lida. He says that's where he is. The girl offers him a drink. Lil thanks him, and his face changes to a surprised expression, and he calls the girl questioningly by the name Azu. He asks if she's Azu, the landlord's daughter. The man says he heard she became a servant for the aristocracy, but didn't think she was in Damien's house, and remarks on how she's grown. The girl replies, "That's right, Mr. Lane." He recalls that as a child, she often came to his room, but they hadn't seen each other in years. He remembers Azu as a little girl scolding him for buying books again, and she told him to save money for food. Lid is surprised and says the girl he recently changed diapers has grown up. The girl, embarrassed, replies that she shouldn't do that, because she's a servant. Lid apologizes and suggests not calling him master. Azu says he really is a genius, and asks if he can copy everything. The girl asks how many copies he can make, and with a sly grin, asks if he can make copies of money. Lid says he can't and that the count was greatly exaggerating. Lid says his copying isn't that strong, but in theory he can copy everything. He says he doesn't like roses because they're thorny and smell too strong. The girl explains that roses are a symbol of love and beauty, and he copies the rose growing nearby in the flower bed. The lead talks about the image, structure, formation of the pattern, and the beginning of circulation. This is how copying occurs. The man explains that the accuracy of the copy depends on the degree of control over the physical form and magical composition of the object. In other words, on understanding. The man gives her a rose, and the girl thanks him and expresses admiration. The man explains that, with just a little touch, he was able to make such a copy. Lid explains that from simple to complex, from ugly to beautiful, the more complex and beautiful the object, the more time it takes, and the same goes for works of art. He says that if you make counterfeit money, it won't be worth anything compared to real money. The girl says she sees it herself. The man says this is the only exception that isn't written in his essay. The girl laughs. Azu says she feels better. The girl explains that she was wondering how a poor man could become a great sage, and thought he'd come dressed in some fancy clothes. The girl explains that the guy is still the same even though he looks different, and that he's still the same bore. Lid looks at her in surprise and asks if that's praise. Shouts are heard from the banquet hall, "Thief, thief." The count asks what happened. The man explains that he took out his relic, a blue diamond necklace, to show everyone, but the count, holding it in his hand, says, "Here it is." Then horror appears in his eyes and he says, "Stop this." The man with the mustache shouts that it's a fake. The man with short hair explains that it's definitely a fake, but the necklace is the only one from that maker, and no one could copy it so accurately. The man with the mustache says that it looks very similar, but it's not the same. Led runs into the room, announces that he can't copy the item with such precision and denies it's him. He says it's not him and asks if they really think it's him. All the nobility at the ball made sly expressions on their faces and began to look sideways at Lita, mockingly. Lid says it might be too late, but then he realized he'd been set up. He explains that, as he thought, it's all about rare magical stones, the artifacts of deceased artisans, and the legacy of vanished civilizations, which can be copied as much as one wants. A man from the crowd approaches Lane and asks if he wants to confess to them. The maid tells everyone to pay attention to the rose. The girl informs them that it is a rose made by Mr. Lane and explains that he cannot make an identical fake. The leader, placing his hand on the AZU, says that he orders not to talk. Lane says nothing will change and it's better to just stay out of it. The girl says that then Lane. She expresses surprise and tries to say something. A man in the crowd asks what Lid did, and a woman says he used some kind of magic. Lid turns to look at this crowd with contempt in his eyes. The Count, seeing this, says he won't let the guests come to harm, accompanying his words with a pointing gesture, and then we hear him exclaim, "Oh, you!" The sound of footsteps can be heard in the foreground. Two knights run toward him, shouting at them to catch the man. Women's screams can be heard in the hall. Lid uses the copy skill and creates multiple curtains. Everyone screams as a multitude of curtains falls on them, covering them. Lid jumps out into the courtyard, and the guards follow him, shouting at the Count, "Don't let him get away," and ordering them to run after him. A man at a banquet says that if he is not involved in anything, he will prove his innocence in court, and the woman next to him says that he did run away. The Count grins and says that they were prepared for such a situation. "That's how it happened, I was set up." Lid, lying in a pool of his own blood, wheezes and groans, trying to get up. He says he doesn't understand what's happening and why this happened suddenly, and asks if she did it. A girl with snow-white skin unleashes a multitude of magical projectiles. The leader tries to parry the attack, but is hit hard and screams in pain as he falls to the ground with a crash. The Count announces that he now understands why she demanded so much money. He says he's a good guy and calls her new product. The Count says not to worry, since in return he will be given the land that was supposed to be given to Lita, and orders him to die without regrets. Lid, gritting his teeth, tells Count Damien that he doesn't understand what copying is and explains that it's magic. Count Damien yells, asking why the guy is being so rude to him. The Count says that he doesn't care who his interlocutor is, because it hurts to hear how a snob who had the audacity to be born a prisoner lectures him. Lid froze in bewilderment. He asks that he was born a captive and asks if he is a snob. The Count asks, "Isn't that so?" He explains that if one is born, one is obviously born an aristocrat. He explains that people like Lid don't understand this, and that's why they are born prisoners. He adds, "What fools they are, there's no salvation for them. They can only be called fools." He explains that this pig doesn't understand logic. The man says that he has the audacity to talk to him and eat from the same table, but still calls himself a great sage. He talks about the image and structure. Lid says he doesn't remember calling himself a great sage, and that His Majesty granted him his status. The Count says that if he wants to ask for forgiveness, he must do so in hell, and explains that he doesn't know what His Majesty was thinking, but he can't give land to a fool like him. He says that no matter how close they are by blood, punishment for insulting the Emperor cannot be avoided, and how bold it is to insult the Emperor while being a Count. The Count explains that if only the two of them hear this, nothing will happen to him. The guy says they're not alone, but what about the girl in the back? He says he thought he saw her there and wonders what she is. The Count explains she's not human, not a real person. The man says he should go back, as the guests are already waiting. Lid expresses surprise. Another man orders him killed. The girl creates a fire tornado in the sky. The guy asks where he is. The man says it's a stupid question and everything is clear. He explains that the guy is to blame for not being born an aristocrat. The guy shouts that he's mistaken and asks what he did wrong. Lid reports that he made it. He says he wasn't planning on just running away and explains that he only needed time for the final copy. He explains that it is impossible to copy a living being with the help of copy magic, because not only is there no complete understanding of it, but the divine phenomenon of life is also not understood. The man claims it was a demon and explains that it destroyed a man lying on the ground. The woman explains that the demon leaves no trace and no living witnesses. 10 months later, a baby's cry is heard. The maid tells the master that he is having a boy. The master asks, "Well, what's wrong?" The woman says she's already chosen a name for the baby, and it's perfect for her successor. The man says he's already chosen the name Savan, but having one candidate for the throne isn't so reliable, although Damien's family is now secure. The man explains that this is the first thing Gosh Damien says. Lid explains that copy magic can't copy life, but there is an exception. The only thing in this incomprehensible creature capable of doing so is the most unexplored life form. The man says that Lid is to blame for not being born an aristocrat. The woman reports that the wine from this region is particularly delicious. The man explains that it is a spirit that guards the estate and will do no harm if left alone. The man explains that the spirit appeared after the estate's owner sacrificed his life to protect the house. The woman says that if there's no resistance, she won't harm him. The man explains that he can't let her leave because she knows too much. The woman says that then they'll have to fight. The man says he's ready for it and isn't afraid. The woman says the birth will go smoothly, and Lid explains that the child will be an heir, so they need to be careful. The man says he will take care of the woman and the child. The man says he's bet everything on it, and the woman says to look. Lane reveals that he was a captive mage and was killed by the aristocrat Gosh Damien. The man says that Lane is to blame for not being born an aristocrat. The second chapter begins, titled Rebirth, the beginning of revenge. The man says this is his son, Savan. The man says he has been reborn as an aristocrat. The woman holds the child in her arms. The man says this defenseless back. The man says he can kill him even in this body. The man says there's no point in killing him now. If he dies without understanding, he could suffer the consequences. The man says he's curious about who the girl is. The man says what else? The man announces that he may become the successor to their title and tells them to raise him strictly. The woman explains that raising him strictly. Lid says that even if everything is inherited by his eldest son, Falk, he will still be put to good use. Lid says he will be the perfect son. He says that he will receive the rights to the inheritance and will become the best successor, and will also gain trust. He explains that he needs to find out everything about Damien's family, even about that girl. The man says he is enjoying life and is not at all worried about his future. The guy says he'll expose everything, kill him and take everything. The man laughs and tells Gosh Demilon to laugh. Lid explains that his revenge is just beginning. 7 years have passed since he was reborn as Damien's youngest son. The lead talks about the beginning of circulation and the paths of development. The lead informs about the structure and formation of the pattern. The man states that it is a copy. Then the man takes one of the desserts from the plate. Lid says it took time to control the magic, but he's starting to get the hang of it. It is reported that the living conditions and food of the aristocrats are different from those of commoners. A barrier is erected around the mansion to maintain a high level of magical power, and from infancy the aristocrats are given rare foods and secret medicines. Lid says it's not bad. He explains that he's already 7 years old and the quality of his copy magic is improving every day, and also explains that he's hiding Lane's magic within himself. The man explains that they, the captives, lived in the former principality of Lorabe and explains that there are several reasons why they lost the war against the people of the Holy Saj Empire, the biggest of which is the difference in magical power. The man explains that Lorabe could not sop. Lid says it's clear he didn't just say it was his fault he wasn't born an aristocrat. He says he will take advantage of his enemy's skill and that strength will definitely be needed in the future. He explains that he is currently caught between success and failure, and his first goal is to become the perfect successor. Lid says he's incredibly lucky right now, and how unexpected it is. Lid knocks on the door and invites Azza in. The servant asks for forgiveness. He says that Azu has become his servant. The girl explains that the flowers in the vase are wilting, and Lid says that this is due to a lack of water. The girl asks if Mr. Savan would like anything, but he remains silent. Lid says that it's okay and orders to continue working, and the girl confirms this with her words so precisely. The woman says that there is only one room in the house where she can hide and asks Lida not to leave it. He says that he understands. The woman reports that when she found out that Azu was still working in this house after what happened to her, she was very disappointed. Lid says he doesn't want anyone to get hurt and explains that if he can't protect his loved ones, he won't be able to move on. The girl says she didn't think that the Azu she knows would cease to be the Azu in whose womb she spent 10 months and whom she knew so well. The woman says she relies on the girl, and the girl confirms this. The girl says, "Let's change the diapers." Lid says she's doing it for her own life, but how does she feel about caring for the son of the man who killed him? The girl asks for forgiveness. The woman says he was a dark man from Nagai, just a person from her past. The boy says, surprised, The woman holds the boy tightly in her arms, and he looks at her. Lane's killer crushed a bug. The man reacts with fear. The woman makes a noise and smiles. Then the woman calmly holds the child in her arms. The woman says to wait a bit, and the boy says well. The woman says she's laughing. Lid asks if anything could get any better. The hero says that she pretends to be a young, exemplary servant, but in reality she is hiding a murderer within herself and only thinks about revenge. The woman says she's changed her diapers for clean ones and wishes Lida to grow up big and healthy. She explains that she wants to gain his trust in order to get closer to the Count, which requires treating her with all kindness. The man explains that the target of Azu's hatred is Gosh, and if the guy says he has had a partner with the same goal since birth and asks what else to call it if not a failure. The man says they'll go to hell together, Azu, and take revenge on the cruel, merciless man. Azu asks if it's the same again. The guy says he's overexcited and adds that the hell. The woman says she'll help. Lid says she's with him, so there's no need to be afraid, and explains that she changed his diapers and even lets him see her naked. The man explains that it's all because of the aristocrats and says there's no forgiveness for Gosh Damien. Lid forbids it and says, the girl says that this is her job. He says that it is not the time to bother with such trifles and that he has a lot to do to become a successor. Lid reports that the biggest problem is his brother's existence. Falk Damien yells at him to shut up and says he doesn't need any theory. Gosha explains that he'll start with the theory and asks if it's clear. Falk Damien declares himself a genius. The text states that he announces that he is the first candidate for the inheritance, and that he needs to be dealt with first. 3 people are eating at the table, and a knight is standing nearby. The man tells Faka that she needs to enroll in the academy soon and asks if she's making progress in her magic training. Faka replies that, of course, she has, and says that the teacher will soon have nothing left to teach her. The man says he's been exempted from the entrance exams, but if he doesn't perform well, he'll defile the family line, and asks them not to let him down. Lid informs him that an order will soon be issued for him to become a monk to prevent a war of succession. He says he wants to ask for something if he gets in. The man replies to speak up. Lid says he wants one worker to be made his servant. The man at the table asks the worker. He says he has some kind of goal. He explains that Faka won't need him because he'll be living at home, but she'll only need him when he's living in the dorm, and that there's nothing strange about a wealthy family having servants. He says he'll take over the family someday. The man suggests inviting someone close to him, but Lid declines, saying his girlfriend is enough for him. Lid points at the girl standing nearby. The man explains that the maid looked after little Savan, but she no longer needs him. He says he's grown up and asks her to conceal her motives. The man is surprised. The man explains he'll tell her the details later and asks her to come to his room that night. Lid asks if she heard it. The man with the glass says he certainly did, but asks her not to gloat. Lid says okay. He says he can't afford to relax because he doesn't know what will happen next. He explains that he's not going to stop and intends to keep fighting. The woman says that even though he is an aristocrat, if he does this to a commoner, it will cause a stir, but if he does it to a captive servant, the woman says that's exactly it. Lid says he said he didn't need a nanny, but he didn't say he was refusing one, and asks her to wait. The woman says that only men live in this house, and he explains that he's not a man, but a woman. The man with the glass says it doesn't matter, and the guy says he's glad to meet Lid. Lid says that after being reborn, he realized that such words hurt. The girl reports that, be that as it may, the man explains that aristocrats must be pure and majestic. Lid says it's unacceptable for the younger brother to simply refuse his older brother's request, and that there's nothing he can do about it. The man explains that if Savan wants it that way, there's nothing he can do about it, and offers to give him another servant. The boy says no. The man says that Lida needs to be punished, and he says that's how it's supposed to be. The man says that this will definitely break him and that he understands the difference in their strength. The man demands a duel and says that this is how true aristocrats settle disputes. Lid asks, "Are you talking about a fight to the death?" The man panics and denies it and tries to explain that he doesn't. Lid turns to. The woman says she's looking forward to it. The man explains that they're guests from the monthly tea party. The guy says it's next month. The man notices how many people there are. Lid explains that they've postponed all their plans because they have rare oriental sweets, so they went to their house specifically. The man announces that he'll be their second today. The man says that in a mock duel, any two-string magic can be used, and the fight will continue until one of the participants says that they surrender. Lid says there are no objections. Savan says it's irresponsible and asks what Lid will bet. Savan explains that Lid won't be able to bet only the maid after his prank and asks how he plans to pay for his losses. Lid thinks Savan wanted more. He says that he will shave his head then, and the man says that he would have to do it anyway someday. The man explains that, according to Damien's family rules, the son who didn't inherit becomes a priest to show his loyalty to the country and avoid wars, and the younger son can inherit if something happens to the older one. Lid comments on how convenient it is to be a believer. The man laughs and says that's a good fit. The old man says the duel is beginning. He explains that the image, structure, pattern formation, and the beginning of circulation are stages of magic, which is distributed among strings from 1 to 9 depending on complexity, and the higher the number, the stronger the magic. The lead says it's the first string and says fireball. He says that the first and second strings are the worst and explains that it is magic that cannot cripple, but the second string is a spiral flash. He uses magic, causing a spiral flash, after which the girl and the man on the balcony react with surprise. The lead reports that this is the second string in antiphase. The man says he's lost in thought. The girl listens. Lid says that with the antiraza, magical attacks would harm him. The man lunges at Lid, but Lid blocks the attack. The man screams that Lid blocked the magic and demands to know what he's doing, asking if Lid understands what he's done, and threatens the future head. It is reported that blocking magic is considered a desecration, and they live their lives in a way that ordinary people cannot even imagine. The man explains that, from an aristocratic standpoint, it would be unforgivable to interrupt, using the same second string technique before an audience. The man explains that this is an act of humiliation that cannot be complained about, even if they kill you. Lid explains that it's one thing to have rights, and another to use them, but above all, he was expected to be aggressive. Lid explains that Falk was furious and could well have punished his younger brother. The man addresses Mr. Falk, and Falk breathes heavily. He says, several people are discussing something among themselves on the balcony. He speaks with surprise and tension. The woman says it's cruel. The man says it's not a real duel at all, but his 7-year-old brother. The man explains that Mr. Savan simply wants to protect his maid, and the other man heard that Mr. Falk was deliberately planning to lose. The boy asks if he's changed his mind. Lid says, "Oh, you," and expresses surprise. The man says enough, the fight is over, and orders the man to get out. He announces that he is his. He shouts that he has won and addresses the man, calling him father. A guy says, "Ocean." A man sharply slaps another man, who is being supported by a woman, in the face. The man trembles. The man says Lid has disgraced him and previously tolerated his antics, but now he's fed up. The man explains that Lid won't receive the inheritance, and Lid says she's taking that right away from the man. The boy shouts to his father and calls him, and the man leaves. The boy asks why and how this happened. Lid reports to Mr. Savan. Mr. Savan is sitting on the ground, and the man is trying to reach him and says he's okay. The girl says that he is silent. Lid says that he and his father will always be there for him and that he wants his father to be there for him. Lid's father says that he will always be there for him and that Lid can rely on him. The man explains that the behavior is befitting of an aristocrat and that he is a true gentleman, and another man announces that Mr. Savan must take over the family. The girl cries. Lid thanks the ladies and gentlemen for the praise and says that the most important thing. He says it's getting really close and he says it's your turn. Then he makes a hand gesture in front of his face and walks away. The lead announces that they will clap their hands. The man and the girl clap their hands. The man says that this boy is not acting like a child at all and asks where he learned this. Lid announces that he's already here and ready to fight. Then a clenched fist is shown. A door opening is shown at the bottom left. A castle with a crescent moon is shown at the bottom right, under a night sky. The man announces that the time has come. Lid tells Faka that it's not necessary, he likes this blanket. Faka reacts with surprise. The woman tells Savan that he is from somewhere. Lid says he's fallen in his father's eyes and such actions won't restore his inheritance. If he kills Lid, he'll be left as his only son, so this is a logical and quick solution. The man says Lid isn't trying at all for his father and wants to solve everything one way. The guy says GH. Lid says he's not some kind of villain and if the enemy leaves, he'll pretend nothing happened, urging him to surrender and become a monk. The man shouts that he'd rather die than remain a virgin. The man casts the spell fourth string, Fire Spear. He says that if you learn the theory that he ignored, it will be easy to do. Lid says he'll make sure the room doesn't catch fire, and calls the first string Fireball while simultaneously using copying. The man reacts with fear and starts talking. Lid warns him that if he tells anyone, bad things will happen to him, after which the man agrees not to tell anyone. Lid. He says it's a good thing he didn't have to shave. The man on the floor tells his brother. It is reported that due to his strong desire, Falk went to a monastery. On the plate there is a small round dessert with decoration on top. The girl says a servant can't have such expensive sweets and forbids him from taking them. Lid says they can split the money, and he agrees. Lid explains that he copied and delivered to the mansion sweets that are rare even for aristocrats. He reports that he did almost nothing, just accelerated Falk's defeat. That's all. He explains that's why he arranged a tea party and spread rumors about the duel there. Lid says that the copied sweet is delicious, but it can't compare to the original, and notes that it is delicious. The girl says that yes, it is true. The image contains no speech bubbles or text, and no characters are visible, only a carriage at the gates of a large building. Consequently, retelling the speech or actions is impossible. The man says he can't walk because his leg is broken. Lid explains he'll help the man by pulling him up in his wheelchair. Savan Damien explains that he studied with the Master of Magic, Largomare, and wants to enroll in the renowned academy, which is attended by the children of aristocrats and was founded over 200 years ago by Largo, the first sage. He explains that if he wants to become the ideal heir, he needs to enroll there. The man orders them to carry it faster. Lid reports that even here they treat prisoners like that. The girl tells Lida that she can't come here. He says he understands that. The man explains that if he doesn't succeed, Gosh will stop trusting him, and Azu's plan might not work either. Lid says that he will fulfill Azu's wish and asks her not to be afraid. He asks if it's a written exam. He explains that this magic ball can measure the knowledge and depth of thought of those who touch it, and offers to shake hands. He wonders if it's a written exam and asks if that wouldn't be faster. Lid says he's only suspected because of his indecision. Lid says the other man has a broad outlook, and the other man marvels at the glow. The man explains that detailed results will be available later and asks him to go straight down the hall and turn right. Lid asks why he needs to go right. The man says this is the room where they'll be interrogated. He says it's the examination hall. The man explains that even aristocrats have other people take exams, and he confirms it's a two-stage exam. The girl asks who it is, and the man replies that it's the one from the Count's family. Yahello announces that he is the third son of the Gellianks and welcomes their acquaintance. Denali says that he is the eldest son of the Ol family and is also pleased to meet them. Lid informs Gelliang and Ol, and also that she is a Sylvan and has decided to take the exams at the Largomere Academy to gain Gosh's trust. The girl asks Ms. Estelle if she will greet him, and explains that if they introduce themselves, there is no point in starting first. Several girls approach. The man reports that he was set up by the daughters of those aristocrats who. Lid reports that they are also taking the exam here and adds that it is unexpected. The guy says they all look like they're hiding something. The man announces that it's time and begins the practical portion of the exam. The lead announces that they've started. The man on the right says that it's already started and that it's the third string. He explains that the strings are fast and can't figure out their trajectory. The guy asks if he's not going to shoot if she can leave, and he asks for Mrs. Estelle. The woman informs him that the fourth string is the Stone Age. She explains that this is a test of magic, not shooting, and asks if Lid can understand this. Lid reacts with surprise and tension. He says he didn't think it was possible to use the fourth string like that at that age. The woman reports that at first glance, the content of the test is chaotic, everything is aimed haphazardly, and one should doubt the aristocrat's ability to manage people. The man in the hat says that everything depends only on one's strength. The man on the left asks if this means that everything depends only on strength. The man says he's a qualified counselor at their school, and the boy says he's too old to be a teacher. Led explains that there's no need to brag about beating a kid. The boy says he's great, and Lead replies that it's a piece of cake and oh well. He says the second string is a fire arrow and says it's a copy. The man and the boy say it's the second string. The man adds that it's a shame. He says bam and shoots multiple fire arrows. The boy and girl are surprised to hear that this isn't a shooting test, but a magic test, and that it's just a second string, and that it's magic that even the children of prisoners can use. Lid explains that yes, such a thing exists. The girl agrees. He explains that with the help of this body and its intelligence, the formation of the scheme, the beginning of circulation, the image and structure, as well as its special shots from the future take place. A woman reports a fifth string. A man and a woman are surprised. The lead talks about the toning goal. The woman says the bell is about to ring, and he says, "Oh well." The girl, shocked, says, "What?" The woman explains that they have a new participant, and there's very little time left, but according to the rules, he must be eliminated. The man asks if he's late. The woman explains that it's the brand's eldest daughter. The girl says she needs the director. The man explains it's the body and the magic. The man says he can't forget it. The girl launches a fire attack. The text says it's the girl who killed Lane. Lid tells the director that something killed him and asks if it's really her. The director explains that if she looks the same as she did 13 years ago, then she's either a spirit or a succubus, and says he doesn't know if that's what she's called. The bell rings to signal the end of the exam, and a man announces that the exam is over and done with. The man explains that it's customary at school for everyone to report to the principal on their exams, and he thinks many people know this, but he clarifies that the first place goes to the important person, and the second place goes to everyone else, which shows their status. The man reports that the results of both tests show Mr. Savan Damien and Sealark are both in first place. Lid reports that a duel is needed. He says he thought Gosh would demand he stop, but when he realized the merchant family's eldest son was watching, he changed his mind and explains that if he takes first place, he can get funding. The man asks if his son's money is more important to him. Lid says well, the woman wants a fair fight, after which Lid and the woman begin to fight. The woman explains that the fifth string is a fire attack. The man explains that the fifth string is a tonitrous chain. The guy reports that they both used the fifth string. Lid explains that it's copying and speaks now. The man orders an ambulance to be called if anything happens to Count Damien's son, and the other man is surprised that the sixth string is at such a young age. The man in glasses says, "Heh." Lid reports, He says that if you know the theory well, everything will work out. He repels the attack. The man reports that he hit the 6th string with his bare hand. He asks if the man hits in that position. The man explains the word copying. The lead says, "Get it." The girl says, "Mr. Savan." An explosion or powerful flash of light is shown at the top right. He announces that the winner of the exam is Savan. Damien wants to report the results of the exam. The girl says there's a huge hole in the field now and that he overdid it. She explains that she can tell Lid's father to increase his budget and notes that he knows his business. The girl introduces herself. Lid explains that 200 years ago he was the first great sage and is now the ancestor of string magic, with the noble Largo standing nearby. Largo says that Lid does indeed have the blood of the demons flowing through his body, but there's something different about it, and his strength belies his age. Largo asks Lid. He explains that among the past students there is one who wants to kill them, and Seal Alka isn't a person, but a weapon in the shape of a person. He reports that his enemy also uses this weapon. He asks if they'll work together, and the man asks, "Well, what about it?" The man says that Lid is a sworn enemy and a great aristocrat. The top right text says this is Damien's mansion. A man thanks him for attending his son's acceptance party and calls him Savannah. Led announces that his son has been accepted to Largo Mare Academy and invites him to join them for some fun, as they have delicious food and fine drinks. Another man says he's already spoken with his son and that a man asks to consider a case for increased funding, and another man says with surprise that it is true. The man says they're hoping for further assistance. Lid says he didn't think his impression of me would change so much. Lid explains that for an aristocratic family, the successor is as important as the head, and if the successor is outstanding, people will gather and money will appear. Lid adds, the man says he didn't understand anything when he lost to Faka, but finally the ugly duckling became a swan. The man and he announce that their family's future is saved. Lid says they need fireworks to celebrate the occasion and that it was the perfect gift. The girl says there are drinks and explains that she won't drink anything the prisoner touched. He says, "Sorry." A girl in a maid's uniform stands with a tray with 4 glasses on it. The man looks away, and 2 people in cloaks are visible in the background. Lid tells Azu that she will be worse off here and allows her to leave. He says they can't leave the mansion until the party is over and asks if that's okay. The woman confirms it. The man turns to Mr. Savan and, if he doesn't mind, offers something. Lid says there's only one thing left to check, then says he'll introduce them to his dad and says it's good. He tells his father that these are his friends from school. The man expresses surprise. Mr. Elio of the Garings and Mrs. Estelle of the Sylves introduce Mrs. Seal of the Margrave Ark family. Lid reports that further. The man says he's heard about Lita and is surprised she can play the 5th string at such a young age. He says it's good he has such an opponent and asks her to try harder. The man replies, "Okay, Dad." He thinks the man has forgotten what happened and can't believe it. A group of knights reports that his memory was magically erased. One of the knights asks if his memory was actually erased. The man says the girl is good, and if Lid succeeds with her, they'll get the land too. Lid says the man was expected to be smart. The woman asks what Mr. Ghosh will give her, since he won first place. The man explains that Savan should choose for himself. Savan says yes, definitely, and the father replies no. Lid tells him that magic, money, people, a house, and the weapons seal. Everything he wants, he already has. The man says Lid is such a wonderful son, but warns him that he could damage his reputation. Lid explains that he wants something and will tell him later. The man agrees. The man laughs and says that it really is. The man wakes up and asks if he's had too much to drink, after which a drop falls into the glass. The man walks down the hallway and asks if everyone is asleep. Then the man loudly calls out for someone. The man calls out, asking if anyone is there, and walks down the hallway, saying he doesn't understand what's going on. The man is startled when he sees Lid and asks not to be scared like that. Lid calls the man Savan and says he's come for what he promised, reminding him that he reports that the servants were given a 2-day leave, and mother went to visit relatives at the mansion. The man explains that's why no one is there. The text block on the left says no one is there. The man asks who's standing in front of him and what he did to Savan. Lid explains he's not Savan and says it's all a setup. Lid tells his father he wants his head. He tells his father that he's figured out who he is. The man screams and says he can't believe it, then names the fifth string. Lid asks if the man has any last words and laughs. The man asks her to stop, saying he gave her money, land, and connections. Lid explains that if the man dies, everything will be his. The girl announces that the party is over, but no one is there, and the man asks what that means. The girl looks at the flowers. In the final panel, the man and girl are talking against a backdrop of roses. The boy says the food is delicious. The man says the girl's food is the best in the world and spends more money on food and books, asking if magic is really that interesting. The girl explains that magic is hard, and eats it. The man tells her to relax and explains that the pattern and circulation are beginning, pointing to the first string and the sharpness. The girl says, "Oh," and the man says, "The magic is great." The girl says that if there's no money for the pumpkin, there's no point in it, and the man agrees that's true. The girl holds. The guy says eh. The man screams that he needs help and calls for help. He's in great pain. The woman asks if he's alone. The man grabs the woman and demands that she call the guards and people, explaining that Savan is his spirit. The woman confirms that he's alone. A man and a woman say they see an old spirit. Led says he's been waiting for this day for a long time and has been training for a long time to put an end to it all. Led stabs the man, who is surprised and says, "Huh." Led says it's revenge for Lane. The man says it's the future. The man says it's a lie. The girl says she did it and names Lidna. The girl says she killed the aristocrat and her owner, Mrs. Gosha Damien, and says Lidna has the right to punish her. The girl says that. Lid asks what the reason was, and the girl says that she has wanted to do this for a long time. He says that if she's ready, there's nothing to be done. The girl calls Lid Mr. Savan and reports that thieves broke into the mansion last night. He explains that he thinks someone found out that the security guards were on vacation, and the thieves took the successor hostage. The woman says she doesn't understand what Lid is talking about, and he says he orders her not to talk. The man makes the A sound. He says the truth is now blurred and that's good. Azu. The man says he knew it all along. The woman doesn't know how Lane did it, but she's amazed he did it. Lid says he still has things to do, but for the woman, that's enough. He explains that she already died once and now needs to find her happiness. The girl says thank you and goodbye, and he says that she is the most important person to him. Lid asks if he should scream, giving the example of how he could say his father was killed and he was worried all night. The girl explains that there's no one in the mansion, so no one will hear the scream. Lid explains that if that's the case, he'll do something different. The girl asks, "What?" The woman says she's happy working with Lid. He says it's good and thanks Azza. He jokes, and the woman asks if that means she's the most important person to him. Lid says that if there ever comes a day when everyone knows about him, then. The man says that the boy knew that at that age he would not say anything shameful. Against the backdrop of the building, it's announced that a month has passed since Gosh Damien's death. Lid explains that the magic now taught to aristocrats was considered a fairy tale 247 years ago. He says that no one probably believes that this great sage is the director of this academy, and explains that the merits of the great sage Largo are called the imposition of waves of magic. He explains that the waves of forces circulating throughout the world, as well as the waves of forces within us, Lid explains that the more waves are superimposed, the stronger the magic becomes and becomes much more complex, and now this magic is distributed on a scale from 1 to 8. He says there is a legend on the other side. Lid explains that ancient magic uses the same principles as modern magic, but modern magic is a bit more complex, and many principles are still unexplored. He explains that there is an ancient magic called the secret or the ninth string, which involves copying many things, controlling people with words, and the man says that's all for today, and there will be practice after lunch, so don't be late. The man says the teacher doesn't like being late. The man explains that the chaos has calmed down since Gosha's death. The girls invite Mr. Savan to have lunch, but he thanks them and declines, explaining that he's been living a fairly peaceful life since he inherited his fortune. Lid thinks that. He says there's no point in sympathizing. The man says he's sorry about Mr. Gosh. The man asks who she is and what she wants, and the girl says that he is still. Lid says that if they continue to operate at school, there's no point in being the principal's enemy, and if they have one enemy, they can use him. Lid says he's not their enemy. Lid explains that he's already lost once, but he's still a weapon, and that's hard to believe. Lid says that if he. The man says that he knows and that there is no lie in the words of the interlocutor. The man says that he wants to save her. Lid says the word save with a questioning intonation. He says he has to save her. The man explains that he's saying she's not a girl, but a weapon, but she's also human. The guy asks how they're going to save her and says he'll definitely save her. The man says that if he decides how, he won't be shy about asking for help. The man says that killing is not the answer and asks if that's clear. Lid wants to tell her something. Lid explains that she needs to start saving and killing. A boy calls out to Lady Seal and asks if he can speak to her. The man shouts at Lady Seal and demands an explanation for why she's ignoring him. Lady Seal leaves without answering. Lid says he has a question about the meeting with the director and would like to know how the conversation went with Mrs. Seal. He says, "Director." The guy and the man are talking. He asks what it is, and the guy explains that it's an old practice arena the teacher told him about. Lid explains that magic is a thing that appears when the forces of the world and one's abilities mix, and that this place is separated from the world, so magic won't work here. The man explains that the arena has existed since the days of duels without magic. He says it's the perfect place for a secret, and the girl confirms this. The girl explains that she's once again realized she has no life or mind, adding that, besides, a woman asks the great sage Largo why he wants to save her. Lid asks what about the conversation about the director. He says that, in fact, he told him several interesting things. The sound of a door opening. Lid informs them that they won't be able to leave now, as they can use the sixth string and, if they want, break down the door. Lid explains that then they'll say they damaged school property and were together. The man explains that this place can definitely be used. He says the door won't open and you can't use magic from inside, and someone decided to make fun of them, which is very childish. He explains that they knew you can't use magic here and calls it terrible of them. Lid explains that this arena is for training, especially for children who don't know this place, and there must be some kind of back exit. The man asks Mrs. Seal to calm down and says they need to find a way out. Lid turns to Mrs. Seal. Mrs. Seal suddenly collapses, making a noise. The girl says she doesn't understand who's in front of her. He expresses surprise. The man makes a hoarse sound and coughs, and he stands nearby. The girl tries to say something. Lid says it's a seal that activates when placed on the body and is officially considered unexplored ancient magic. Lid explains that it's similar to the control Audrey used and asks if someone is controlling it. He says he wants to save her. He explains that because she's not in contact with the outside world, the control magic doesn't work, and this room is definitely the one. He says they need to find a way out quickly. If they help her, she'll stop suffering. He says no. He explains that this is the unknown. Lid reports what he's found. Lid holds the girl, energy sparking around them. The man explains there was no sound of the door being broken down and laughs, saying they'll be living there now. The man stands with a group of people on the practice field. He asks if they made it in time. The man says this clothing is rare and asks if it's a military uniform. The woman explains that the uniform is torn. It's not very revealing, but it shouldn't be in the way. The man says fine and orders them to stand still. He asks what next. The man and the boy. The sound of a bell is heard from the belfry. Lid announces that he has arrived. A man is sitting on a bench, and a girl is standing behind him. He says the weather is nice. The man in the hat reacts with surprise. The girl asks where they are from. He explains that they need to be honest. Lid wants to introduce her and asks if they're okay with it. The girl says it's not funny at all and calls Lid Savan. Lid says he's serious and adds that they're serious too. The man says he won't be shy about asking for help and says they've arrived. The woman says that Mr. Largo is sitting here to avoid seeing anyone and asks what Lid wants to get. The girl asks what happened. He says nothing, he just wants to introduce them. Lid says that something should happen now if he hasn't miscalculated anywhere. The background depicts a lake with mountains in the background. A man underwater is trying to break the surface, blowing bubbles and moving vigorously. Schools of fish swim around him. Lid says this is the size for the copy and explains that it's a detonation. The girl panics and asks what's going on. The man and Lid at the table are surprised and ask why. The girl says detonation and he says that in the future Lid says she could have exploded. The man says he's found magic and that the receiver is located here. He explains that it's lucky they only used physical force, and it's possible to change it without using magic. He says that as long as she's close, it won't hurt, and says, oh. The man says that if you adjust it to his waves like Audrey did, then it's ready. Lid says he'll try that, explaining that only the sender remains and will notice that Seal has fallen into the wrong hands. A man with a beard and a hat asks about the copy. Lid explains that after the arena, he returned Seal's body, copying every spell on her. The guy says that it is impossible to copy a living creature, and if something works out it will be an ordinary piece of meat, and also explains that if the enemy controlled Seal he would definitely notice, and besides the piece of meat's signal did not change, which seems strange. The man in the cloak reports that the enemy can't tell Seal from a piece of meat. Led explains that they deliberately dipped the piece of meat into the lake, and it brought Seal to them. Led explains that, if you think about it, the murder weapon has too many instabilities and the man wants to. He says it's smart and explains that he needs to drown a piece of meat. The man reacts with a question. The old man asks for a moment and says it's hard to believe a copy mage with a grudge against Damien exists, and asks if it's him. Led reveals that he's the captive mage Lane, who was reincarnated as Damien's son, and that anyone who keeps a secret doesn't inspire confidence. He says that she is important to the sage Largo, and he tells her to take care of her. Lid says he's come here to ask for help and explains his goal is to find a missing person. The man at the table says he's ready to listen and offers to tell him everything in detail. The old man is silent. The girl says that before his death, Mr. Lane said it was impossible to separate the soul from the body, and she says this like a puppeteer. He says that if you make 2 loaves of bread from 1 loaf, 2 people will be fed, and that's how he created this magic. The guy reports that the citizen's body is devouring his soul. Lid explains that they weren't always like this. Power enslaved him when he discovered magic, and even the secrets of the human body began to die barefoot. The man says that corruption couldn't have arisen, right? The man asks what they'll do with him and says he needs to be given the chance to drown in his thirst for revenge before he dies. The girl with the ears says there might be a way to stop him, and the maid finds this interesting. The man remains silent. The woman explains that they need to send him to the dark territory of Silva, since it aligns with his goal and is a chance for them, since he's going to hell anyway. Lid asks if anything hurts, and the woman says he never said anything. The image contains no speech bubbles or text. It shows a carriage pulled by 2 horses traveling along a road. The driver controls the horses. Lid asks Seal how she's feeling, and Seal replies that she's probably fine. Lid says that Odari says she's fine, but if anything's wrong, to tell her right away. He says he doesn't really understand what could be wrong and agrees. She reveals that Arca Seal wanted to kill the Academy's director and remembers practically nothing. He explains that Arca apparently acted by receiving tasks through a magic circle and was freed thanks to her, but her memory is gone. Lid says it's strange how this happened and explains that unexplored magic is just that. She says it's okay. Mr. Savan did everything perfectly and he's a great guy, and all that's left is to study it. It is reported that while the situation is at a standstill, Seal is living in one of the rooms of Damien's mansion. The enemy cannot move easily when he is in the grip of the conspiracy, and the Arc family is silent, although they expected her to say something. He says that he does not understand anything, but thanks for saving him. The man tells Mr. Savan that he is close. Lid looks away. He says this is Silva territory. The girl shouts at Savan to watch, and he is surprised. The woman asks if this is a prisoner. The man says Azu and asks not to leave him. The girl explains that there will be a lot of celebrations this year, and Lid explains that they'll be able to relax and have fun. The boy says he found some fireworks, and the girl says she wants to play with them too. He says they're not paying attention. He says the other guy wanted to show him something and calls him the director. The guy and girl ask about the Silva territory and Estelle Silva. The director explains that yes, along with Seal, who was sent to study off-campus. Lid says there's no point in giving up the chance to get to the enemy, but he came to find out why they're being targeted. The man says it's related to Sile's territory and he'll tell her everything. He explains that he adjusted his magical waves so Sile could live, and at the same time he took her hostage, noting that it was a necessary measure. He asks if this was part of the plan. The man says he wants to save someone. Lid says he wants to save someone again and asks who this time. The girl remains silent. The man says he wants to save all the prisoners. He explains that the people have become insolent after gaining power, and now they're not even afraid to defame someone else's life. Unfortunately, the prisoners suffer as a result. The lead explains that even a parrot can laugh, but if you don't back it up with facts, it's not as funny. The man explains that a girl can laugh and the girl asks why. He asks why they need to go to Silva territory and says they'll understand when they arrive. The man explains that he wants to save them and has a responsibility as the person who gave the people magic, and also says that he doesn't mind if he chooses his target there. He says he's being hunted. The girl reports that the guy has granted her wish and explains that she has no right to stop him from fulfilling his, but asks him not to kill Estelle. The guy warns that if he grants the wish, he must not kill Estelle. The girl says that this is not an order, and the man explains that it is just a request. It's reported that the director had long been helping prisoners from the rear, and when they found out about this, they began to attempt on his life, and he locked himself in that room. Lid asks if he wants to save the prisoners. The girl says that even children use magic, but there's no need to fear immature mages. Magic can't do everything, and there's no need to panic. The man tells the rifle squad to get ready. The man on the roof commands the first, second, and third riflemen to attack. Lid says this is a tactic. A man and a girl look up at falling arrows. They say this tactic was the reason for the replacements in Largomere, and it was used for 3 months. It's designed for efficiency and dispersion. Such a tactic wasn't accepted in conventional warfare, but it was the poor who developed it against magic. The top right text states that there are few mages and that they wear light armor so they can gain power without interfering with each other. The top left text explains that those who failed the exam died here, leaving them defenseless and likely to fail unless they are exceptional mages. Lid says that soon. The girl asks if she can talk to them. The woman says she didn't expect such a tactic and asks their names. Lid says the men mentioned something about his parents and asks if they were aiming at him to take him hostage. Erica says they've been oppressing them for a long time and can't stand it anymore. Reminds them that they saw the hanged body themselves and claims it's her parents. The woman asks if he knows what her sister's parents did to her when they wanted to cure her. The man tells Lid this. The guy says they said they'd clean up the mess, but then they threw them in boiling water, and he can't forget their terrifying faces. The girl and Lid listen. He says he understood. Lid says they'll have to do what he says. The woman says that's why. Lid orders them to die. He says he can't believe it happened. Then the sound of brakes is heard. The sign says this is the Silva mansion. Lid says that here. He tells Mr. Savan and Ms. Seal that she heard about the attack on them. The girl asks them to forgive her father, who is not at home now. He says that they will definitely punish the attackers, and Mr. Savan says that nothing terrible happened. The man explains that because of the smashing, the leader is afraid to ask what the interlocutors are going to do and says that destroying bad people is the job of the strong. They are not going to let them win. He says it's excellent. The girl explains that she probably overdid it a bit when she fought them off. The man says, sorry, he killed them. The woman explains that they needed to be killed anyway, so it's okay. The man lifts the lid of the cart, revealing the contents. The girl says, oh my! Lid looks ahead. 3 people are sitting on the couches in the room, 1 girl is standing, and they are all in the living room. He says he's against it and shouldn't invite people into the mansion without his father's permission. The man explains that it would be strange to simply send them away, but he's the count. He explains that the Damien family hires prisoners and provides them with shelter. His father said that this family would one day taint the blood of the citizens. Lid says that Mr. Savan is so handsome and asks if anyone has seen it. The girl tells him what needs to be done to make them such freaks, and the look on his face when he looked at them. She also says that until she finds out, she won't give him up. The man tells him to treat him politely and allow him to move around the mansion freely, to which the other man replies that he absolutely does. Lid stands in the hallway and listens. He says he wants to tell something about the destroyed prisoners. He says that Madame Estelle is here. He explains that he killed a resident of foreign territory and asks to receive a document exonerating him. Lid explains that Estelle was initially hostile to him because of his treatment of prisoners, and he then fell in her eyes because he treated prisoners like people. He says that Estelle was unpleasant and her thoughts were likened to those of the village. 1 girl reports that even her subordinates made fun of her, while another girl says it was difficult to live with. Lid thanks Mrs. Estelle. Estelle explains that it's nice to have someone who understands Lid. But the man says he's not looking to make friends. The text says the image depicts the former capital of Loriva, Kefis. The man holds up a letter and says it's a letter. The man explains that the letter has Estelle's seal on it, but the handwriting is different, and asks if someone else wrote it. The man reads the letter and exclaims that he doesn't understand what's going on. The image shows the Silva mansion. Lid looks out the window. A man in a cloak walks quickly down the street next to a carriage and a guard. The man reports that his carriage was attacked and asks if it's true. He also says that it was written that Lid is here for treatment and asks how he's feeling. He reports that he can't believe this happened. The man asks if Lid has a head wound, what the bandits did to him, and whether the prisoner's seed was really implanted in his womb. He also mentions that such rumors are circulating and must have caused Lid great harm. Lid mentions Estelle's name with surprise and asks about the marriage. The man says he will destroy anyone who stands in his way for stealing his future, and curses them, calling them mongrels. The man explains that the other man isn't even being cautious, but simply trying to protect himself, and 3 figures appear in the doorway, telling him. He says they felt the same way when they saw their family die. A woman reports that Lego Silva has a heart of stone. A man asks the prisoners how they got there. The man explains that he was told the bandits were dead. The guy says their corpses are fake and that it's not Estelle lying there, but a copy of her. Lid explains that the copy was probably made while she was sleeping. The man in the cloak says, "Copy." He says that Estelle is safe then, thanks to someone. He tells her there's more bad news. You're going to die here, and hell awaits your daughter. He explains that everything is according to the plan of the greatest sage, or whatever his name is, and adds that he's a monster. The man asks if he's really alive and expresses disbelief. Lid informs him that it's a replica of the greatest sage. The man says he's being avenged for calling Damien against his will. He stabs the man in the stomach. He says his ears hurt and orders him to stop. The man makes a pained noise. The insert shows the man and woman smiling. The woman asks what's going on and why they're alive and Lego isn't. The masked man says that can't be. Lid says that Count Savan, "What is this?" and asks, "Are you all okay?" The man with short dark hair, the masked woman, and the woman with long dark hair watch the scene. He says that everything is as he said, and explains that he will let her die once to allow her to take revenge. The woman says that this is not an answer. The woman says they were lured here and it feels like a trap, and the man says they were given a little hope and was sure they would enjoy it. The woman explains that they understood everything, but they had no choice and were even willing to die if they made another cut. The man asks why. The woman explains that she realized he wanted to destroy his political enemy, which is why he used them, and didn't want to be judged. The man is surprised. Lid says he has never met such people. There is strong trust and compassion in her eyes, and the man explains that his servant is a captive. He says that when it comes time to make a choice, people believe in something. Lid says it could be something true, something beautiful, love or friendship. He says that people believe in those who believe in them, not in those who trust them, that they are always right, beautiful, and full of love. He explains that this is not enough. The man reports that these are prisoners. The girl says they've forgotten that she gave them life and demands that those responsible be found. Otherwise, they'll all be fed to the monsters. Lid says it's best to think about the family. The man explains that the girl's mother fell ill after learning of her father's death, and that the future of the family now rests on her shoulders. He tells. The warrior explains that it is the warrior's job to find the guilty, and the interlocutor's job to hire them. The lead announces that playtime is over. The girl replies that it's playtime. Then she asks how so. The girl says she's the only one thinking about her father's funeral and asks what she should do now. Then the girl hears a knock on the door. He shouts that the door is open and invites her in. The girl, frightened, begs Mr. Savan not to do this. He turns to Mrs. Estelle and Lid says there's no time for that now. The girl says that instead of worrying about the territory, she needs to think about herself. He says that if he protects his family, then he explains that right now she is the most traumatized of all and is simply holding back the pain that is ready to tear her apart from the inside. The man says that the girl's father also recently died, and the girl says that it's true. Lid says that only someone who has experienced this can understand. He addresses the girl, calling her Ms. Savan. Lid explains that he only needs to do one thing. Let others control the territory, and he must take revenge for something. The girl asks what that is. Lid explains that he says that only prisoners could do such a thing. The man reports that Mr. Lego was not killed in the mansion and no one saw the criminals. Lid says it could be anyone, even himself. The girl asks if those helping them really exist. She explains that she doesn't think they're in cahoots and explains what Mr. Savan did to them for attacking him, and also suggests that there might be a person. He says he has no idea, for example, someone who doesn't like guests reacts to this. Lid smiles. The man says he's against it and shouldn't invite people to the mansion without his father's permission. The man turns to the woman, surprised that she's decided to trust him with everything. The man asks if it's possible to trust him unconditionally, but he says that Mr. Savan is the same age and already the head of his clan, and asks if it's bad to use his experience. The woman says the Count can't be trusted. The man asks if Lid wants him to trust the Count. The woman says she's not stupid and can choose her own job, and if the head seal is intact, nothing bad will happen. The man confirms this, saying that if you don't like something, you should observe it yourself. He expresses his displeasure with a tisk sound. The woman leaves, and the man looks at her. The man announces that the academy will be offering a new course this year, which will be held in a different building. Lid explains that documents need to be prepared for the new course and asks the girl to help fill them out. The girl writes, and Lid points to the appropriate places in the documents. He says that the fact that the servant invited the robbers is complete nonsense, but there is only one left, and he can use her for his own purposes.